Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today is week 8 of the Oh Happy Day Sampler Sew Along, and I am excited to share this fun block with you. I am filming from a beautiful fall day here in Ohio, and I am curious where you are watching from. I would love to know, so be sure and comment below and let us know where you're watching from. So as you can see behind me, we are making the Sweetcake block today. And here is the pillow. The pillow is made using At Home by Bonnie and Camille. And the quilt behind me is made using a Sherri and Chelsi line of fabric. And they are both just so pretty. I think we're going to have fun making the block today. At least I am. The block does have stitch and flip corners, which I know some of you guys aren't fans of, but I'm going to show you how I make them just as I have in other videos. But I'm also going to mention another product that you can use for these square in a square blocks. And it might be a tool that you've not used, maybe one that you have used, maybe one that you'd like to use. So I will give you another option for piecing these as well, in case you are not such a fan of those square in a square blocks. Let's go ahead and take a look at the fabrics that we are going to need for this block. Your fabric requirements are found on page 39 in your Oh Happy Day book. You are going to need 8 squares listed under the first print. Those are these prints right here. And then the next section of prints is going to be this gray section outside the block. And for those, you are going to need 12 small squares and then 4 medium squares. For the fabric that you're using on your background, I'm using the white on white fabric from Buttercup and Slate. You are going to need 5 large squares, 4 medium squares, and 4 small squares. The first thing that we're going to do is make those square to square blocks. And as I said, I'm going to walk you through how I make them, and then I'll share another product that you might like to use to make those at the end of this portion of the tutorial. The piecing instructions for this block begin on page 35 in your Oh Happy Day book. And to start with, you are going to need one of your larger background squares. And then we are going to need 2 different prints. We're going to need 2 of our lighter print and 2 of our darker print. And we are going to be making stitch and flip corners on all of the 4 corners of this block. Now, the pressing for this block is going to work best if you press everything open. So even when you might initially press away as we're making these units, make sure that you press those open. And that's easiest to do 1 square at a time. So when I make square in a square blocks, I like to do my opposite corners at the same time. So what we would do is flip these over, right sides together. You would draw your diagonal line from the bottom left to the top right, and that is also your sewing line. And then I would just go ahead and put the other print on the opposite corner so that I can sew these at the same time. So the diagonal line from bottom left to top right, sew on that. And then just like in the weeks previous, last week, for example, when we did the Twinkle and Shine block, and then also in the week when we did the proposal block, whenever I do these types of corners, I always sew and then press and then make sure everything lines up and then trim out those bottom 2 layers. So I am going to go ahead and prepare 4 squares just like this, come back over, touch base just a little bit and show you what I'm doing, and then add the remaining 2 corners. So let me pop over to my sewing machine and get sewing. Here is what your blocks will look like now. I've made 4 of these, and I have trimmed and pressed 3 of them. And I saved 1 so that I could show you the pressing and the trimming just in case you're new around here and you haven't seen this technique before. So I have, as I said, sewn my squares onto my background square, and the first thing, and then pressed everything away. The first thing that I want to do is make sure that I am happy with the way these lay on this top square. We don't want any overhang on our sides. on the front or the back. We want that square to be exactly the same size as it was before we sewed those corners on. Once we have verified that everything is how we want it, then we can trim out the bottom 2 layers using a 1/4 inch seam. I'm just going to use my scissors and trim that seam allowance away on both sides. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we are pressing these seams open. So the next thing that I would do would be to take this over to my iron and press those 2 seams open, just like you can see I've done with these. And then we need to add our remaining corners. And you are going to use 4 of the small dark print. Those are going to go right sides up in these top corners on all 4. And then you will also need 4 of the small squares of your other print, and those are going to go in the other corner. So your diagonal will be running from top left to bottom right, top left to bottom right. And you're going to sew and construct those in exactly the same manner that you did for the first 2 corners, making sure that you're pressing those seam allowances open as well. And again, all of the piecing information, if you like to see written piecing instructions, those can be found on page 35 of your Oh Happy Day book. So you can reference those whenever you need to. I'm gonna go and pop over to my machine again and get the rest of these square and squares done, show you what they look like, and then show you that other product I was talking about. Here is the completed square and a square block. You will have 2 matching prints on the one side and then the other 2 matching prints on the other side. The seams are all pressed open. You are going to have 4 of those total, and you can see the finished measurement that you need for those on page 35 of your Oh Happy Day book. Now, the other product that I was talking about is this square in a square foundation paper. You can see that it comes in a variety of sizes, and the size that you would need to make these blocks is this size right here. Now, I'm going to flip it open and show this to you. I'm not going to go into detail about how it works or how you use it, but I am going to link to a tutorial that Kimberly over at Fat Quarter Shop shared on her YouTube channel. Fat Quarter Shop is the designer of this product, and they've put together a wonderful tutorial on how to use it. It is specifically for making square in a square blocks, and as you can see, so many different sizes that you can use. But it is a foundation paper that you can use with the paper to sew these, and it's a wonderful way to make square and a square blocks very accurately. So if square and a squares are something that give you trouble every time you see them in a pattern, or if you see them in a pattern and you steer clear because they have square and a square blocks, you might be really happy trying out this paper. I'm going to link to the tutorial, like I said, but I will also link to where you can purchase these pads of paper. You do have to pay specific attention to the size that you need, because there is a different pad for each size that you might run across in your pattern. So pay attention to that, but this size, the 4-inch square and a square, is what you would need to make these blocks if you wish to use it for this project specifically. Moving on, but first, look how cute that one is. You could make really teeny little square and a squares. Those are just adorable. Okay, now for real, moving on. The next step that we need to do is to make half square triangles. And we are going to be using our medium squares that we have left of our lighter print here and our background print here. I have marked my diagonal line across the back of my background fabrics for this step using my Fons and Porter Omni Grid marking ruler. I don't think that I have talked about this ruler before, so I thought I would just show you. If I am marking, this is one of the ones I really like using. You place the lines on your diagonal, and then it gives you your 1/4 inch on either side to perfectly mark those. So if I am marking, that's often what I am using to mark with. So I've marked those 4 background squares. I'm going to pair them with these, as I said, to make half square triangles, and then I'll pop back over here. 8 half square triangles have been made. You can see what size to trim these to on page 37 in your book, and these all get pressed open. just like we've done with everything else. So press all of those open. Your next step is also on page 37 of your book, and you can see I've laid it out right here. We're going to use 2 of our half square triangles and then 1 of the small prints that you still have left, the small print squares, and then 1 small print background square as well. You're going to sew them together in pairs and then sew this together into 1 unit, pressing all of those seams open. You will make 4 of these. Let me sew those together, and we are so close to finishing up our block. This is what your unit will look like after you've sewn those 4 pieces together. You will need 4 of these, and you can see what they measure on page 37 of your Oh Happy Day book. And looking down at my table, you can see all of the seams have been pressed open. And I have gone ahead and laid out all of the block pieces. So we have the units we just made, our square and a square units, and then the 1 remaining background square. And we will just sew those together in horizontal rows first, pressing all seams open, and then sewing everything together to complete our block. Let me do that. And we have a completed Sweetcake block. Your block will measure 12.5 inches square. We can take a look at the back of the block too, so you can see everything will be pressed open, and that is going to allow your block to lay nice and flat. I hope you have enjoyed making your Sweetcake block. We have 1 more block to go after this one for our sampler, and then we have a couple weeks of sashing and setting instructions, which I'm really excited to start letting you see how our quilt is going to shape up. I think it's going to be so pretty once it's done. Thank you for sewing along with me, and I will catch you again next time.